Today we are going to do a tool called top grading. To set the stage for this tool, I am going to share with you some result of an elaborate research study that I conducted. This is a federally funded by the governments of both US and Canada research study that I did. I took worldwide data and I analyzed the data precisely, mathematically precise, and I came to the conclusion that half the doctors in the world graduated in the bottom half of their class. Now, next time you are on the operating table, you might want to look up top half, bottom half. Scary thought, eh? Even though that is just a humorous introduction to a much more somber observation that I am now going to make for you. You go out there in the world out there. You go out there in your world, look at all the people. Look at all the people out there. Go to your local mall, go to your local county fair. Look at all the people you can see. Half the people in the world are in the bottom half of whatever it is they do. Half the people in the world. Half the people in the world are in the bottom half of whatever it is they do. I mean, half the people in the world are below mediocre. Below mediocre, not at mediocre, because what does at mediocre mean? It means at the median. No, half of them are below mediocre. Where do these people work? I don't know. Are they at your place? I don't think they're at my place. Where do these people work? If you don't know where these people work, guess where they are? Probably at your place. There's a saying at the poker table. When you walk up to a poker table, if you don't know who the mark is, it's you. Get out of there. So if you don't know where these people work, they're probably around you at your workplace. Look around. I mean, who would you like to hire in your company? Now, most of us would say, I would like to think that I have in my company an unfair share, a disproportionate share of the upper half. That would be great. If I can get a disproportionate share of the upper half of the market, then I am doing better. What are you doing about that? If you are not doing anything about it, you are not going to get a disproportionate share. In fact, if your competitor, if your market competitor, employment competitor, if your competitor is doing something actively to get a disproportionate share of the upper half, then you, by definition, are going to end up having a disproportionate share of the lower half. Remember, he cannot get a disproportionate share of the upper half unless you accept a disproportionate share of the lower half. So if you are not doing something actively, if you do not have active plans, actions, things you do to acquire a disproportionate share of the upper half, then you have, by definition, because your competitor does have that, you have a disproportionate share of the lower half. Now, it is very easy for us to convince ourselves, oh yeah, no, we are a good company. A lot of people want to come work for us. You think your competitor isn't saying that? You better find something that you're actively doing. I mean, it could be, I offer the kind of work environment that nobody else does, and therefore more people want to come work for us. If you really believe that you're doing that, you could say, I pay better, so more people want to come and work for that. If you really believe you pay better. Or you could say, I provide access to greater, better machinery, better tools, and people want to use these tools. They come and work for us. If you really believe that, you better have something active you're doing to create a disproportionate share of the upper half. There are techniques that companies use to constantly rototill the organization so that you get rid of the people in the lower half and thereby acquire a disproportionate share of the upper half. I'm going to share with you this technique. It's called top grading. There are three techniques that are predominantly used. Top grading is the idea of periodically assessing your staff and saying these people are not in the upper half of the market. I'm going to get rid of them. I'm going to hire new people, and that by doing this constantly, I'm going to get a disproportionate share of the upper half of the market. Three techniques for top grading. By the way, I'm not advocating any particular one. Again, like most of our logic style workshops, we offer the choices, you make the choice. First, rack and stack. The principle here is very simple. It's an extremely simple method to implement. It's called rack and stack. By the way, it's derogatively known as rank and yank. This was probably made most famous by GE. A lot of companies use this. Lots of large companies use the rack and stack model. The theory is very simple. You rank all your employees from the top performer to the bottom performer. You get rid of a certain portion of the bottom performers. For example, at GE, they get rid of 10% of the bottom performer workforce. Then you go out in the marketplace and you hire that many people back in, hopefully at or above the market median. And if you keep doing that, you will get a disproportionate share of the upper half. Number of companies use this. As I said, GE uses it regularly, and it is probably the easiest thing to implement. It does sound brutal, doesn't it? Well, here's the second one, ABC players. In fact, the ABC school takes issue with the rack and stack school. The ABC players school of thought says there is a problem with the rack and stack model, they argue. They argue that the rack and stack model doesn't acknowledge the following. The ABC players say there is a correlation between high achievers and people with high aspirations. High achievers tend to have high aspirations. People who do very well tend to want bigger jobs, more responsibility, greater leadership, maybe some management. They want higher level jobs. And yet, the ABC players, this school of thought, suggests in a pyramid-like hierarchy, there are fewer and fewer jobs at the top of the pyramid. So if you, like the rack and stack model, if you keep getting these high achievers, you get a whole company full of these high achievers. They all want bigger jobs. There's not enough jobs at the top. They will leave. They will leave to go run other companies, in fact. Witness, they say, GE. Look at how many people from GE go off to become a CEO of another company. The ABC school says, we want some A players, but not a whole company full of A players. In fact, we want a whole bunch of B players as well. Now, we don't want any C's now. So the ABC school says, let's take our staff, let's take all the employees, we label them as A player, B player, C player. We get rid of the C players and then hire back and maintain a ratio of A's and B's that we desire. The rebuttal that the rack and stack people offer to that is this. Rack and stack people say, you know, I have yet to see a mother who doesn't think her child is beautiful. Every mother thinks her child is beautiful. You see, every manager is going to think their employees are great. They don't have any problem people. All the problem employees, they are in the other department. They are in that other site. So the rack and stack school of thought says, if you let each manager decide who is an A, B, and C player, nobody is going to declare their employees as C players, or very few going to be declared as C players, and you're going to get an inflation of grade. The only way to avoid that, they claim, the Rack and Stack School claims, is to have numeric distribution requirements, such as 10% of the bottom workforce. He says, otherwise it's not going to happen, they argue. And then there is the top quartile philosophy. The top quartile philosophy stems from some work of DeMarco, who wrote a book in the 70s called Peopleware. Here's what DeMarco observed. Let's say I am a ditch digger. That's what I do. I dig ditches, and I dig ditches with a shovel and a spade. And I am a fantastic ditch digger. Now, if an average ditch digger can dig, let's say 10 ditches of a given dimension a day, what do you think? I, the fantastic ditch digger, how many ditches in a day do you think I might be able to dig? Well, it turns out that DeMarco found that the excellent ditch digger might be able to dig 13 or 14 ditches. 30 to 40% above average would be considered excellent performance, he found, in manual labor, when the muscle is involved. He said, in manual labor, excellent performance might be able to provide 30 to 40% more productivity than the average performer. Now, let's instead shift our conversation to not manual labor, but cerebral labor. A knowledge worker, an architect, an engineer, an accountant, a lawyer, a doctor, a marketing professional, a salesperson. How much more productive do you think an architect can be over an average architect? Here's what DeMarco found. He took 4 different professions, and he came to the conclusion that in knowledge workers, the excellent performer can be 10 times as productive as the average worker. 10 times, not 10% more, 10x. That would be 900% more. So he said that in knowledge workers, the spectrum of performance ranges from the average of x to as much as 10x. In the different professions he examined, the multiplicity ranged from 4 to 7 to 10, but it was multiplicity, not percent more. The top quartile philosophy argues that when you have that wide a range of potential productivity amongst performers in a particular class of work, if you examine how much you pay a top architect, an excellent architect, how much do you pay an excellent architect over and above what you might pay an average architect? I'm going to venture you don't pay an excellent architect 10 times what you pay an average architect. No, not even 9 times, not even 8 times. In fact, you'd be doing pretty good if you pay them 30, 40% more than an average architect. So the pay ranges more like that. The top quartile philosophy argues, what is the better business proposition? If you were to buy bolts to bolt down a heavy piece of machinery on a spaceship that's going to go out in the outer space, and you needed to make sure this machinery is bolted down just perfectly, and you could buy bolts that could hold 10 times the weight for 30% more the cost, or average bolts, average cost, which ones would you buy more? Obviously, you would buy these, a tenth of them. The top quartile philosophy says, hire from the best and pay the best. The reason it's called top quartile is suggesting hire from the top half seems to be very weak. The top third, there is no word called thirdile, so quartile. But the idea is simply hire from the best, pay the best. The top quartile philosophy says hire from the top quartile of the market and pay the top quartile of the market. Mind you now, comparing the rack and stack or the ABC players, comparing rack and stack versus top quartile, here is a distinction. Rack and stack, it compares people in your company. In contrast, both ABC players and top quartile compare your company with the people in the marketplace. It's a different comparison. They both serve the same purpose. This is an easier comparison to make. The top quartile, examining whether your person is in the top quartile of the market, is a more difficult evaluation. So whereas you cannot have in the rack and stack, you cannot have everybody in the top half of your company, half the people have to be in the bottom half of your company. In contrast, in the top quartile, it is theoretically possible that everybody in your company is in the top quartile of the market, though the chances that they are is very small. What the top quartile philosophy says is attempt to get everybody in your company from the top quartile of the market. Now, obviously, you might not, so you have to keep working at it. Some pitfalls in the top quartile. You might bring somebody that you think is in the top quartile. They might in fact actually operate in the top quartile for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then they fail to be in the top quartile. What do? By the way, when you brought them in, what did you do? You paid them from the top quartile of the pay range. Can you take away the pay now that they're not in the top quartile of the market, in your opinion? That's tough to do, isn't it? You might want to go look at a tool called the parking lot exercise, which is a tool that you can use to hold yourself intellectually honest to see that your people are in fact in the top quartile. But in all three cases, rack and stack, ABC players, top quartile, in all three cases, you are trying to top grade. You are trying to get a disproportionate share of your people from the upper half of the market. Remember, half the people in the world are below mediocre in whatever it is they do. Or do you have an unfair share of the upper half?